Good morning. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of October 16th, 2024.
You can go up.
Recommendations of the Planning Commission on certain items from this agenda will be considered by the Board of Commissioners at their regular meeting on November 6th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. The Planning Commission utilizes speaker request forms, which are available in the Commission chambers during the meeting. And if anybody needs to know, they're in the back of the room. All right. Roll call, everyone's present. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes of September 23rd?
We have. I move to approve, Madam Chairman.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the September 23rd meeting. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Approval of the agenda.
So move.
Oh.
Second.
I like this. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as submitted. All in favor, oh wait, discussion? Any comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Consent agenda.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brittany Molitor, Planning Director. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any Planning Commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of this Planning Commission on certain items from this agenda are recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners, who will make the final decision. Item number 4 is conditional use permit review CUR 1023 for Reynolds and Livingston LLC to review a recreational vehicle park with 4 RV sites in a highway service district, and staff recommends to end conditional use permit review CUR 1023 as the use has been inactive for more than 2 years. Item number 5 is conditional use permit review CUR 2018 for Wild Spring Solar LLC to review a utility scale solar energy system in an agriculture district, and staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit review CUR 2018 with conditions. Item number 6 is special consideration to Trailwood Village Plan Unit Development, PUR 2310 for Forrest Foster, to review a special consideration to PUD 79-02 to allow a home occupation for a gunsmithing and machining business. And staff recommends approval of special consideration to Trailwood Village Planning and Development Review PUR 2310 with conditions.
Would staff like any items removed from the consent agenda?
No, not at this time.
Would the commissioners like any items removed from the consent agenda?
Madam Chairman, number 6.
Number 6? Okay. Any others? Okay. Would anyone in the audience like any items removed from the consent agenda? Okay. The chair would address a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of number 6.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Item number 6.
I just have a question about number 6. Is this a profit-making business?
It's mostly for him to have the ability to work on guns for himself and his friends. I'm sure he does have some sales, but it's not like a commercial business like you would imagine.
How's he going to attract customers if he can't take?
I think it's just for his friends and word of mouth.
Is it?
That's what I understood.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Is there, would you make a motion on
I
item
make a
number
motion
6?
that we approve.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item number 6.
Just as a point of discussion on this one, I do remember this. He still had to go through all the processes with the federal and the state and the local authorities in regards to that, even though I remember that we had some questions about him using it as for himself and his friends. He still had to clear the whole slate, so I do remember them. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Item number 7, conditional use permit COCU 24-0027.
Cody Stack, environmental planner. Item 7 is conditional use permit COCU 24-0027. It's to allow an animal sporting event, dog sporting events on the subject property. The applicant and landowner is David and Angela Dorn. Staff is recommending to continue conditional use permit COCU 24-0027 to the November 25th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting to allow the applicants time to bring the property into compliance by obtaining approved building permits for 4 unpermitted structures and to obtain an approved approach permit.
Other questions for Cody?
I do. Madam Chair, I do.
Yes.
Are you having difficulty with the building permits here, or is there a hang-up that's gonna
So they came in
create
at,
another continuance?
so they came in after the first meeting because this was continued from September 9th, I believe. They travel back and forth to California. They still do stuff in California. And I know that one reason why they're not at that meeting is because they're in California now. But they did pick up the permits and they did get the information to get the approach permits from County Highway. And I believe they're still working through that, but they do animal or canine training in California quite a bit. So they're over there quite a bit.
Are the items where they could handle them back through like the internet and process mail?
They could, once they submit the building permits and the approach permit, it shouldn't be too big of an issue to get those. They would just need to submit those applications to us. And staff is working with them on doing that.
You think the November date will be enough?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions? The chair would address a motion on this item.
I'd move we approve staff's recommendation to continue to the November 25th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting, COCU 24-0027.
Second.
So, it's been moved and seconded to approve COCU 24-0027, to continue, to November 25th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, item number 8, preliminary plan COPPL 24-0003.
Yes, so item 8 is preliminary plan, COPPL 24-0003. It's to subdivide to create lots 1, 2, and 3 of Par Property subdivision. The applicant is Par Properties LLC, Paul Zweifel, and the surveyor and engineers, All Aspects Incorporated. Location is 22742 South Rochford Road. Involves approximately 10 acres. Current zoning, the staff report says agriculture district. The Board of Commissioners actually approved a rezone to rural residential, so it is actually rural residential now. Access is off Defied Road and there's no special flood hazard area on the property. This was read around for interdepartment review. There were no objections or concerns that were received. The applicants are requesting to subdivide the subject property to create 3 lots. On April 6, 2024, the Board of Commissioners approved rezone RZ 23-03 to rezone the subject property from agriculture to rural residential district, and comprehensive plan amendment CA 23-0002 to amend the future land use from ranchette to rural residential district. And on May 16th, 2023, the Board of Commissioners approved subdivision regulation variance SV 23-04 to not construct divide road to ordinance 14 standards. A private access easement has been dedicated as divide road, as you can see on here. Divide road comes here. So this is the 66 feet. The road actually doesn't, farther down here, doesn't reach the property until it hits Forest Service land. So they dedicated this access easement to allow access off divide road there. There's an existing accessory structure on proposed lot 3 that will require special permitted use once the Mylar is filed. And the proposed plat is missing some certificates. Staff will work with the surveyor to correct those. So with that, staff is recommending approval of preliminary plan COPPL 24-003 with conditions.
Are there questions for Cody?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Gary.
So Cody, I remember dealing with this some time ago, probably years ago at this point in time. What's different now as compared to what we were doing back then?
So nothing's different now. They actually applied for this back in February. They just weren't meeting a bunch of the conditions from the layout plan and some of the other things. So we took it off the agenda, and they fixed those issues. So that's why we've brought it up now. So they really applied for it a while ago. It's just taken them a while to get those things corrected. And I believe the variance that was approved by the Board of Commissioners said it had to be 18 feet. The road had to be 18 feet.
That was the previous action you were talking about?
Yeah, so that was the subreg variance that was done in April of 2020, or sorry, May of 2023.
Okay.
So they were required to, they didn't have to build the ordinance 14 standards, which requires 24 feet, but they were required to build the 18 feet, and I believe that they have actually improved that to 18 feet.
Okay. So we haven't verified that? We haven't looked at it, or?
I believe it's done. I believe Brittany was out working on it. This is extended over a 2-year period of time.
Right.
Brittany Molitor, Planning Director. I was working with the engineer for quite a few months to get the engineering for the road and the road constructed. So that's kind of what took some of the time and what was the delay. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam
Charlie?
Chair, I'm kind of like Gary. I remember when we looked at this, and my question would be, at that time, there was some opposition from the adjacent neighbors. Have you had any follow-up on that? I see none are here, so I think the landowner must have spent some time speaking to them.
Yeah, and I also believe that the engineer was working with that property owner to the north, and I think they helped improve that road all the way through.
I see.
So I think there was some concessions with
Little
that as well.
joint.
Correct.
Getting together. You bet. That was my question. I just wondered whether you had received, I saw we had no letters or anything, and I remember, like Gary, when this first came in, was a little bit, and I accept that you haven't convoluted any of our ordinances in your suggestions for what has to be done here. I agree with you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this item? The chair would address a motion.
So move.
Second. Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve preliminary plan. Am I on the right one? COPPL 24-0003 with 10 conditions?
Yes, that is the one, Madam Chair.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Item number 9, lot line adjustment plat, COLLAPL 24-0005.
Morning, Commissioners. Jason Tennyson, Assistant Planning Director. Again, agenda item 9 is lot line adjustment plat, COLLA 24-0005, to combine 2 lots and create Lot 4R of Tract 11 of National Placer Mining Claim 688. The applicants are David and Kelly Pummel. Their surveyor is Ponderosa Land Surveying. Location of the property is 12127 George Frink Road. Property is currently zoned suburban residential district. Access is off George Frink Road, and there is 100-year special flood hazard area on the properties. Staff did approve layout plan for this, LAPL 24-0013, with conditions on September 12th of this year. Some property history. Lot 4, as you can see, is the one to the south on the screen. Just below the red line. That is 0.29 acres. There's a single-family residence, 2 sheds, on-site wastewater treatment system, and 2 floodplain development permits for other building permits. Lot 5 is the one to the north. It is 0.64 acre. There is no, it's 0.36 acre, and is vacant of structures or utilities. And the proposed lot is just simply removing this red line and just combining both of those lots to become 0.64 acres with all the structures that I indicated earlier. The request was sent out for interdepartmental review, and staff received no concerns or objections to the request. Staff's analysis of the request is that the applicants are requesting to combine those two lots, create a .64 acre lot. It is currently zoned suburban residential district, so it meets the minimum lot size requirements in that district. And with that, staff recommends approval of lot line adjustment plat 24-0005 with 2 conditions.
Other questions for Jason?
Madam Chair, I've got a question. Well, the way I read it, and I guess I want to hear it from you, the snow removal issue isn't a factor anymore. It's basically resolved. I was in shock when I read that the snow removal was in there for those property owners, you know, in the first place, but I'm glad to hear that it's resolved. Basically, the county doesn't need a special access to go do that?
Yeah, it looks like the Forest Service is working with the homeowners association up there to create a road district. But at this point, they say that the Forest Service isn't requiring any kind of
special
access permits or any kind of special permitting, provided that that homeowners association essentially acts as a road district and takes care of the road.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can I have a question? I have a question about the readdressing. Was it just not correctly addressed before?
So, yeah, when we issue building permits down there, we ran out of address points, so we had to realign everyone and send out some new addressing for them. Kelsey noted that in the staff report routing, just more or less to highlight that that happened.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any more questions for Jason?
One little one. I ride my bike on the McPasses. I'm familiar with this. The flood plain is almost the entire lot?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, well,
They have 2 floodplain development permits on the property right now, one for a shed and one for a deck addition that they put on. So they are in full compliance with that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's what I was looking at. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? The chair would address a motion on this item.
Madam Chair, I'd move to approve per staff's recommendation. I believe it's got 2 conditions. COLLA 24-0005.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve COLL APL 24-0005 with 2 conditions. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Item number 10, conditional use permit, COCU 24-0026.
Good morning again, Commissioners. Brittany Molitor. This item is to allow an accessory dwelling unit on the subject property. You have seen this property already. There was a rezone and a preliminary plan. Just some history on this. When they rezoned it back to rural residential, it was highway service. Prior, they had a recreational resort type of use on the property. So they had a house, an ADU, and a shop building and some RV sites. You saw the previous request to end the CUP for the RV sites. This is for the, they had an accessory dwelling and in highway service. It was allowed, but now that they rezoned it back to rural residential, they have to get the CUP for the ADU. So this structure has existed for quite some time. It's just bringing it into compliance with the current zoning district. So they are trying to plat this and sell that portion of the property. They're selling that western portion of the property to someone, and then that eastern portion is going to the Sugar Shack, and that remained the highway service district. So this is just kind of a housekeeping item and cleaning up that use. It's been in existence for quite some time. This property was a recreational property again, as I said, for several years. But this is just kind of an idea. We verified the septic is sized appropriately. Most of the structure is above. There's a large garage and carport on it. When we reviewed the criteria, it meets all of the requirements. So staff did not have any issue with this request and is recommending approval.
Okay. Are there questions for Brittany?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Does part of this property run into Lawrence County then?
Yes. So they did file a portion of the plat in Lawrence County. Let's see, so that north portion of it that had the, look here, this portion of the property right here,
Right.
is in Lawrence County, and it was the old, there's like a pizza place. It was Cousins Pizza for a while.
Okay.
But that portion of it is in Lawrence County, and they did file that plat with Lawrence County.
Okay, so the 3.87 acres is all in Pennington County, though?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? The chair would address a motion on this item.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion to approve COCU 24-0026 for a conditional use permit.
Second.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve COCU 24-0026 with 14 conditions. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item number 11, ordinance amendment OA 24-11.
So this ordinance amendment is to amend section 204F for dead-end road systems, to amend and supersede the existing section. The reason for this is to update the section of the zoning ordinance to require mitigation measures on a dead-end road system. We already did this ordinance amendment in our subdivision regulations, so this will mirror our subdivision regulations. So we have two different regulations that oversee, I guess, or regulate dead-end road systems. One is in our subdivision regulations and one is in our zoning ordinance. So the one in our subdivision regulation obviously has to do with subdivision of the property. This is for any subdivision of property, because in the county, outside of the 3-mile plating jurisdiction and within the 3-mile plating jurisdiction, this would apply. When properties are adequately described, they could create a situation where there's more than 40 lots on a dead-end road system by just describing and transferring that property and not going through the plating process. So this would apply as part of our zoning ordinance versus our subdivision regulations. That's why it's in both places. So I just kind of wanted to give that back history of it. And then one of the things that has changed, the original one didn't have any mitigation measures. The existing text uses and. The proposed text is or. In the fire protection area, it would require a fire mitigation plan or any other fire mitigation measures that the developer or the homeowner would like to do as part of that as a measure. And then the flood hazard areas, if they are in the road system, and it's actually, we did change this beyond the initial hazard. There are several areas in the county, Dark Canyon, things like that, that have several hazards. So it would be at the initial hazard. They cannot provide access to more than 40 dwelling units. So this will mirror our subdivision regulations as well.
Okay, questions?
Madam Chair. So, Brittany, you know that I've been asking questions relative to this in regard to the Falcon Crest developments.
Correct.
On behalf of the constituent. And so I noticed that the language changes now from 40 dwelling units and 2 miles to 40 dwelling units or 2 miles.
Correct.
Explain to me the difference.
So both of those would have to apply to be out of compliance. So you would have to have 40 dwelling units and the road system would have to be greater than 2 miles in length. You could have more than 40 and a shorter cumulative length, and it would still be in compliance. With the proposed text, it could be either or. You could have 40 dwelling units, or if you have 40 dwelling units and it's more than 2 miles, then that would be out of compliance. So you would have to, in the first one, you have to meet both criteria. In the second one, you have to meet either criteria. So if you have more than 2 miles of cumulative length and you have no egress, no matter how many dwelling units are on it, it still would be out of compliance.
Okay. It's just, I've had a tough time getting the
Sure.
information in order to have this make sense to me. And I know the constituent has felt that same way, that had difficulty. And so, and he happens to be in the audience today also. So.
Right. And this is an interpretation that staff has made in conjunction with legal counsel, that the and is meaning that both have to apply for it to be out of compliance. With the or, it could be either.
So on the previous one, going back to the Falcon Crest development, so when the survey came in showing that it was only the 1.87 miles instead of 2 miles, that's what changed that entire proposition as far as requiring or not requiring a variance.
Correct.
Correct?
So if there was a challenge to the mileage on it to show that it's more than 1.87, but they did have a surveyor go out and verify that it was actually under the 2 miles. So with that, that variance didn't apply. That variance would still stand if there was more than 2 miles in cumulative length, but there is not. At this time, there is not.
Okay. Madam Chair, I would just suggest, I don't know if you require written request forms to testify or not,
Oh, no, if,
but I think if Noel would like to.
Madam Chair, I got a question before then too, because he may want to know why I've got a question.
Okay, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Whenever you're done, Gary.
I'm done.
All right, I'm going to pick on your wording too,
Okay.
and I hate to do that, but I'm picking on the second one. It has the road system beyond. I'm not sure that's the word you want to use there, because does that include the count that may be already in the zone? You may have a grandfathered situation where you already have some houses in the zone, or does it count those beyond the zone? Follow me?
Yes, and it's.
What if you got more than one, like you said? I didn't realize we had some with more than one flood hazard area in a road. That would even the word beyond would muck it up even worse.
Well, so this came about, I'm not sure if you remember, there was a request on Bradsky Road, and it was the
Sure.
first property on Bradsky.
That's been the question for years that started this whole thing. Go
Correct.
ahead.
And so the hazard isn't well beyond several properties. So really what the issue is in this situation is the hazard is the concern when it comes to flooding, like Bradsky Road. So those properties that are before the hazard probably aren't at the risk that the intent of this is supposed to be mitigating. So that's where that comes from. So like, I'll just use Bradsky Road because people know that one. Where the bridge is and beyond, it would count for all of the homes past that, which that one too is, upwards of 70 lots, even beyond that bridge. But there's 3 or 4 that are before that, and it's a very short segment. And reasonably, they could probably get to Highway 44 easily, even if that flood hazard. So that was kind of where the thought process had come because of that request. And there's several other ones in the hills where the hazard is, the ones in the front probably aren't going to have to mitigate or be at a risk. But the flood hazard area is basically a no. If there's more than 40 lots beyond that, it's like there's no mitigation. That's basically what that says.
I just think the beyond, it's like writing, I accuse the legislators of writing laws so there's a loophole out here that we close the loophole for, and that's what I think we're doing here with beyond. I don't think that's really the word we want to use in that case. I think we need to be a little more definitive. But you picked a good example, but that example also has it originally arrived on the scene because it was on wasn't it on a section line? That's where it all started from, and somebody wanted to know who was financially responsible, and of course, it ended up nobody. And that started the whole thing for people. And somebody in the meantime counted the number of houses, said, oh my God, we got a bridge that nobody's responsible for, and we have all these people living on the other end of that road. So, and you are correct, that's years ago. I'll bet that's 15, 20 years ago when the whole thing started. But in this case, I'm saying if I was to read this and I was the one that was looking at being in that area, I'd say, well, let's say some of the people came out here and they already built, and it's there. Do I count theirs before I get to my lot? That's what I meant as far as confusing on the word beyond. And now that you tell me we actually have some with more than one, it would, to me, it would be more confusing. But that's my own feeling on it. I didn't like beyond, but that's all right. Maybe the rest of the commission doesn't see that. Word beyond's a little, it just doesn't fit.
Well,
Isn't that an issue on Schroeder Road too?
Yes, that was actually fire. That was a fire mitigation. And what they had done for that plat is they proposed fire sprinkler systems in the homes on those lots. So that would be a fire mitigation proposal. We cannot require sprinklers in a single-family residence by ordinance. It's against state statute. But if the developer chooses to do that as part of their fire mitigation, as part of their fire mitigation plan to meet the requirements, they could, but it's not required. There's other options that they could have for fire mitigation.
I figured out a way to be more specific. If you say beyond, and it does say that, beyond the initial hazard, which side does the line start beyond on the hazard? Follow me? And hazard, we haven't developed all the places that are going to get developed. Who knows? We might have more influx of people here. And which side does that line, the beyond line, start? Follow me? Mm-hmm. And the hazard in this case could be a whole, you've dealt with it engineering-wise, could be a wide plain, could be a dry plain, it could be a wet one. Well, I just think it's complicated. But
So you're trying to say that it means that if you have 40 before you get to the bridge that might wash out, it's okay?
Or you got 20 of them, and you're the next guy, and you know that there's another 20 lots down the road that are going to be, they're there. There's situations where we have, there's more 40s sitting out there because all the lots aren't developed, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, at least I've seen it. Go ahead, Jason. I don't mean, I mean, I'm really being a stickler on a little thing, but if you're a person coming here and you read that, the beyond, I don't know. Somebody, I just see an attorney having a field day with that one.
So when we drafted
And you know I don't love them. So they're dear folks, but I just don't love that taking apart what we intend. And I know what we intend, but will they? Thank you.
So the intent behind this was an example, a really good example that I had in my mind when I wrote this was Thunderhead Falls. You have
Which one?
Thunderhead Falls.
Okay.
So you have multiple bridges down a dead-end road system. The intent is to stop it at the beginning. So the first bridge crossing would be the initial hazard because all the other bridges are, if that one becomes impassable, everybody's trapped. Like, we wanted to have the initial hazard to be identified somehow.
With a bridge, I could believe it. But don't we have a bunch of them sitting out there with planes and previous that are just sitting there, that they don't know they can develop? They're dry right now. They're dry creek beds, what we call dry creek beds.
Yeah, so we're talking about the 100-year special flood hazard area or floodway, a flood hazard area. That's what's defined up there. So that's what we're trying to regulate. If there's a creek crossing or something of that effect that's not identified on FEMA maps,
It wouldn't be a hazard.
Jason and Brittany, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying I think not everybody's going to understand that or look at it the same way. Beyond just is not the word I would use there, but that's me.
I think if it generates a conversation and someone calls the office, we're more than happy to talk to them.
Okay.
Is there further discussion on this?
No. In fact, thank you. I think they've cleared it. It's just that I just don't think it fits.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So Brittany, you're saying that the language beyond is used in the subdivision ordinances too? It's consistent with what's in the subdivision regulations?
The subdivision regulations does not have the beyond.
So how's it worded in the subdivision then?
It's just the road system hazard.
I didn't look at that.
Yeah. Let me see. Beyond the initial hazard is not in there. It's just as the road system must not provide access to more than 40 dwelling units. So for the purposes of 204F, this is for issuance of building permits for habitable dwelling units. You could have potentially an ag building, a large ag property that could be on a dead-end road system, they could still get a building permit for their ag operation. They just couldn't get a building permit for a dwelling, where in the subdivision regulations, you just couldn't further subdivide any of the property beyond that. So that's kind of the difference between the two and the reasoning between the slight language change, because it's kind of applied a little bit differently, because we look at, from a special flood hazard area, like habitable type structures versus, like an ag structure. We didn't want to hamstring a property that couldn't put up some ag building or a calving shed versus a dwelling.
Could I ask, I had one idea. What if we put the road system beyond the limit of the initial or something like that? In other words, we don't have to worry what the limits are. We'll just use whatever the FEMA, and they certainly have the rights to question those. And we haven't changed anything other than we made that, we followed a line somewhere. Would that work?
The like floodplain limits, like
Yeah,
the
that's
actual,
already there, the hazards limit, the floodplain.
instead of the actual structure, actually have it be the delineation of the floodplain.
Limit, yeah, the road system beyond the limit of the initial hazard.
It should probably read special flood hazard.
Yeah, something like that. I'm just saying, well, that way we've selected a line that they work from. That's all I'm
Oh,
asking.
yeah, if the dead-end road system crosses a special flood hazard area or regulated floodway.
Right.
So it does say that in the first sentence.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the chair would address a motion on this item? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to speak?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I hadn't intended, I hadn't intended to speak.
Yeah, would you introduce yourself?
Noel Hamill, I'm a resident of Countryside South, and I'm here to gather information, certainly not to debate the planning director. But I do have a couple questions relating to the proposed text, if I might. If this proposal is approved, then it goes to the county commission for final approval, is that true?
Yes.
Board.
So if that's approved, would it have any impact on the proposed development south of, I mean, that's already underway.
Right, you can't retroact.
Okay. So I have a number of grandkids here, and to be promoted from second grade to third grade, you have to pass 75% passing grade in your coursework, and you have to be present in class. I don't know what the number is, but those are the two conditions. Now, if you do not meet one of the conditions, then you don't pass. It's 75% and class attendance. Now, the original language that the department wants to change was if you have a dead-end road system, you can't have more than 40 dwelling units, and it can't be more than 2 miles in length. In the present case, the surveyor said that the land, or the distance was 1.87, and so I'm told that that means that the entire ordinance is not in place, so the development can go forward. And to me, and to a lot of people, that doesn't seem to make much sense. And is a conjunction connecting words or phrases, and there's an equality there, and it usually links one to the next. If you do this, if you have 40 units and you have a mileage and one is in arrears, then you can't go forward. But we're hearing now that if one is in arrears, or if one is not in compliance, not arrears, then the other one doesn't come into play. And So maybe in one sense, it would be an improvement to change it to or. So the question I have is, does that mean that for protecting future homeowners and developments, that the new ordinance with the new language would be more protective, more restrictive?
It would depend on the situation. What the development that he's speaking of too is in the city's 3-mile plating jurisdiction, which also has a 40-unit rule requirement. So the plating is where the lots are actually being created, not in our zoning district. So the issue with the dead-end road system has more to do, typically more to do with the subdivision, which is under the 3-mile plating jurisdiction. So the city granted an exception for the plating and is allowing the additional development.
They have the say-so on the plating, is that?
Correct, because it's in the 3-mile plating jurisdiction, correct.
And in all fairness, it could go out farther if that changes in the future. I mean, cities are looking at requesting to go farther.
Every time they annex, the 3-mile plating jurisdiction goes out farther.
That's what
correct.
I thought. Okay, thank you.
The concern of people that live in Countryside South, we have 184 dwellings in Countryside South. There's one road in, Countryside Boulevard, one egress, one access. Now we're adding houses to the south. It's starting with, I believe, 11 units. Well, but that's the start. And so you have a proposal that would require a fire mitigation clause, but it doesn't address a secondary access or egress road. You still have one road in and one road out. Now you have a higher standard for fire mitigation on the new 11 dwellings or lots, but you don't have anything to address the egress access, the safety of the fire department, the congestion, the safety, because the developer couldn't manage to get someone to sell property to provide another access road. In fact, at the July Commission meeting, there was even discussion of condemning public property to provide that access egress roads. Fortunately, the Commission didn't want any part of that. So you have 184 plus 11, and there's room out there for a lot more, and yet you just have one road. I don't consider this proposed text with a fire mitigation plan a real way of addressing the safety concerns. When I talked to the fire chief, he didn't give me a positive review of it either, even though they provided the plan. So I know this is maybe a fait accompli for the current development, but it is a big concern for people that live out there, folks. And the state's attorney made the recommendation, as I understand it, to the county on the interpretation of the and. Instead of coming up with an interpretation that said, okay, you still have the 40-unit violation, and so you need a variance to go forward. They didn't say that. They said you can go forward without the variance. I don't understand it, but I'm not a lawyer. So that's really the only comment I have to make at this point. It's really disturbing that homeowners out there aren't afforded more protection.
Madam Chair.
Any questions for me?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to. Noel, are you aware of the extent that our county fire administrator can draft and bring to Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners a fire mitigation plan? What I'm getting to is the Highway Department certainly has some standards that have been greatly expanded on from when this initially started, turnaround, and it has to do with the size of equipment to improve the fire districts, whoever it may be, volunteer or whatever, improve their accesses to that, and so trucks can move around. We've done the same on our width of our roads that are allowed in these developments. And I guess what I'm saying is I see that it comes from the Pennington County Fire Administrator. He certainly would be very cautious on the one you're talking about as far as what he would accept as a mitigation program just because he's got a job and he swore to do it.
Yeah.
Have you looked at any of those or talked to him about that?
You're talking about, I believe it's Fire Chief Cunningham?
No.
No, what this is referring to is.
The county.
County.
Oh, no, I have not.
Okay.
From Hurry?
I did talk to our Whispering Pines Volunteer Fire Department, which
All right,
has Countryside
sure.
South, and they knew very little about it.
So in our development review team meetings, we have those every 2 weeks on Thursdays. Typically, one of the fire administrators, either the one from the city, Chip Prismas, he comes to our meetings because he deals with things in the 3 mile plating jurisdiction, or Jerome. So, and all of these requests do get routed to both of those gentlemen. So.
Madam Chair, can I ask Brittany a question? So were you saying before that when this came to the city of Rapid City within the 3 mile, area, whatever that is, that their requirement is even less restrictive because they allowed the additional development?
They did. They granted an exception to the 40-unit rule for the subdivision.
And what was the reasoning for that?
Because the 8 or 9 lots are required to have hydrants at a certain distance, and they're required to have fire mitigation sprinkler systems in each of the homes.
In the lot. And that was the reason for the less restrictive
Yes.
exception?
Yes. So that is going to be a requirement for this development that they do have, and it's going to be noted, and there is going to be an agreement in place that they are required to put fire sprinklers in each one of those new homes.
And I know when I lived in Countryside and then Countryside South came, there was a water supply concern for Countryside South, so that's not an issue anymore?
Apparently there is not, because they are providing water to these lots.
Okay.
So that was part of the requirement as well during the plating process. I just had happened to read the staff report, but they are providing water to these lots.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, I just have a question for Brittany too. In their response, the fire administrator, we don't have a restriction in regards to if he decides that he still feels there needs to be an egress or an alternative program, he can describe as he sees fit. Is that not correct?
Yes, and he has in the past. One of the items I know that the board and this commission would remember is the music festival requirements. He did require them to improve the road. That was his suggestion, and that was one that this board had also agreed with him on that, and they were required to improve that road to 18 feet because of the ingress egress concerns. So there, I mean, it just depends on the situation, and he looks at each one individually. So sometimes he may require or suggest, thinning. It just depends on where it is.
And then my second one would be most of the things that would go through under this particular revision would go through both bodies. The 7-member, 6 citizen members of a planning commission as well as the elected board of commissioners.
No, so if they wanted to do this, they would have to get a variance, and then they would still have to meet those requirements in addition to a variance. So they still would have to go in front of the Board of Adjustment, no matter, because of that first statement. It just, because it says, in addition, the following applies.
Thank you. I just
So if
wanted
you-
that on the record so
Okay.
everybody understands that's listening to this.
Correct. So even if you have the 40 dwelling units or the 2 miles, you would still have to go in front of the Board of Commissioners to get a variance. If the variance is granted, one of those 2 items apply.
Correct. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I ask a question?
Certainly.
So the state's attorney provided an interpretation of the ordinance to your office?
So I would prefer that you ask the state's attorney that question. We work on the fact that how this reads, what had come back, and what the surveyor provided was 1.87 miles.
I was told by the city planner that if they want a legal question on the plating, which is their jurisdiction, is that correct? And yours is zoning?
Ours is the building permits, theirs is the plating.
Okay. And she said that they go to their city attorney for legal advice, but the Pennington County State's Attorney goes to, provides advice to county commissioners. And so I was under the impression that the state's attorney was the one that advised you on the text.
They agreed that it had to be 2 miles, yes, and that it was 1.87 miles, so.
And so, since the 2 mile was in compliance, the other one, there was no need for a variance.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Noel.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Chair would address a motion on ordinance amendment OA 24-11.
I'll move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve OA 24-11. Any discussion or questions?
Sure.
Yes.
I'm not comfortable with the language, so I am going to vote no on it.
I'm confused. The more I hear about it, the more it's like we're trying to do something, but within the 3 mile area, it sounds like the city can supersede it anyway. If they, well, I mean, they can recommend, a variance.
So in order for the plat to go through, one of the conditions of the plat is that it meets all of our zoning requirements. With the 204F, if it was over the 2 miles, the plat wouldn't have been able to go through because it wouldn't have met our requirements.
Okay. Because they came up with the 1.87.
Correct.
In the example you're using.
Correct. So let's say that they had another area that they wanted to subdivide, and the zoning wasn't appropriate. And this commission and the board denied the appropriate zoning. They couldn't plat because they can't file the plat because it's not in accordance with the applicable land use regulations.
So you feel, so I guess what you're saying is you feel comfortable that the way this new ordinance is written is going to protect homeowners like the gentleman who spoke was concerned about?
It would address the concerns that he has with the OR.
Okay.
The other item is, then that way we have an avenue that if there is a reasonable area that you could mitigate or something like that, you could have reasonable mitigation and still be able to develop in those areas. And this just has to do with the issuance of building permits.
Yeah.
This 204F, the subdivision regulations have already changed for this.
Because again, what you're saying is the city has a plating jurisdiction, but the county has the building permit jurisdiction.
The land use authority. So
Yeah.
we oversee the zoning and the building permits. So both of those would have to be
In compliance.
in compliance. And the city does come to our development review team meetings. We attend theirs, so we're aware of the development and we do speak to it. Like I had said, the fire administrator for the city, Chip, he attends our development review team meetings. So we are in constant, communication with them. Their planners reach out to our planners. So we're in constant communication about the development in the 3 mile. So if one doesn't work, I mean, they both have to, be in compliance in that 3 mile for land use and the plating.
Because again, the way I read this, by changing the and to an or, you're making it more restrictive.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
You're giving them less. They have to comply with one or the other, not both.
Right.
I mean, it's more restrictive.
Correct.
Madam Chair, Brittany?
Yes.
Now, you said that all these new lots are required to have fire safety sprinklers in them. Is that correct?
Yes, that is an agreement that the developer made with the city for mitigation to be able to continue with the plating process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's been moved and seconded to approve OA 24-11. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
You got that, Gary? Okay. And conditional use permit, COCU 24-0022. Could have combined them, couldn't we?
So these two requests for the conditional use permits for the wind and solar, the applicants have requested the continuance to the October 28th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting because they couldn't attend this meeting due to some other obligations. So that would be for both 12 and 13 for COCU 24-0022 would be to continue this item to the October 28th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. And the same requested motion is for 13 as well.
Do you need two separate motions on it? Or?
Yes.
Yes.
Since we didn't combine them, well, we couldn't anyway. All right, the chair would address a motion to continue COCU 24-0022 to October 28th, 2024.
I'd make that motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, and chair would address a motion on COCU 24-0023.
I'll move to continue COCU 24-0023 to the October 28th meeting.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Okay. Executive session, we don't need that, as far as I know. County Board report.
The Board of Commissioners concurred with the Planning Commission's recommendations from the September 23rd, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
Items from the public, we don't have any public remaining. Items from staff.
Items from the staff, we have the building permit report. If you notice, our single-family residences are up to 32 for this month. That's mainly due to we had 20 building permits for that Apple Valley subdivision. That was the one on Anderson and Reservoir Road. So they are starting that first phase of that project. So they've applied for all the building permits for that. So that project is underway. So that puts us well above well above for last year at this time.
Okay.
So we'll probably continue to see more of those.
Okay. Items from the membership.
I'm going to be out of town for the next few weeks and would like to participate in the next meeting remotely. So should I talk to Jerry about that?
We'll get you with Commissioner's office.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Madam Chair, with viewing of the solar facility, is that still on? Do we have to have that as an official meeting?
I think we're going at different times.
So
Signed up,
what did we finally decide on the tour date?
21st,
21st, yeah, I'm gone then.
coming Monday.
And you said you're going at different times, you're just going at different times that day? That's the only day? Oh, okay.
Okay. The chair would address a motion to adjourn.
Make that a motion.
Second.
Adjourn.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
All opposed?